Good afternoon and welcome to CAD-1's Layer Filters and Layer States webinar. Today I have Michael Calkins, registered architect, one of our training and technical specialists here at CAD-1 on both AutoCAD and Revit and another number of other pieces of software that Autodesk forces him to learn. My name's Stan Henney. I'm the Business Development Manager. I think you'll enjoy today's webinar. So with that, let's go a little housekeeping here. This is the screen that is more or less wrong anymore, but because the little double arrows, if you want to minimize your console, are now the orange and white arrow at the top there. But you can minimize the console so you can see the whole screen. If you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand. I'm not ever sure why you'd want to raise your hand. But anyway, then if you want to change between the telephone and the mic and speakers, there's that. The most important box there, though, is the Ask Your Questions box. If you do have questions, please type them in, and we will answer them as quickly as we can in context as much as possible. And we have a little bit of information on upcoming events right now. One that's not on the list, but it's still not too late to get in on. Michael and I and Brian Juge and Brian Haley will be traveling to Aspen tomorrow to do a presentation on mountain architectural design and via model-based design. In conjunction with AIA Colorado West Chapter. And it will be at the Pitkin County Library from 1 till about 4:30 tomorrow afternoon. It is no charge, and we'd love to see you there if you can make it. We have some of our more fun, not that today won't be fun, but we have some of our more lighthearted webinars coming up here soon. We have Civil Chat with Brian Haley, a chance for you to ask questions about Civil 3D and related topics and get them answered. Revit Radio is always a rollicking good time with Brian Mackey and answering Revit questions on the fly. And our host today, Michael Calkins, will be doing his AutoCAD Answers on September 20th from 1:30 to 2:30, and that's always a lot of fun to do as well. So hope you can tune in for those. And so let's see, with that we'll go ahead and get started. Michael?
Hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about layer states and layer filters, and there's several parts of both of these, and these are kind of things that I know a lot of people are aware of their existence. A lot of people, when I talk to them, ask me a few questions here and there. How can they take advantage of them? What's the best use? Layer states, a lot of people are also familiar with. They were once upon a time referred to as a layer snapshot. So they've updated these a little bit. Most of the functionality is still there, and there's some great advantages to using these, implementing them, saving them to your templates, having them available for everybody's use, and making sure everybody in the office is aware of their existence and their proper use, and that using them can be a big advantage, a big time saver. So we'll go through. I'm going to start out talking about the Layer Property Manager, and then within that we're going to talk about the layer filters. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Layer Properties Manager here. And a number of years ago they introduced this pane over here on the left side of the Layer Properties Manager, and this is our layer filters. A lot of people don't know what this is. They come in here and they just kind of toggle the little more or less icon there and hide it because they don't want to deal with them. Now I've got a couple that I've created in here. Oftentimes when you first create a new file, or if you're not using layer filters, what you're going to see over here is just this all heading and all used layers. You might have also seen that occasionally if you're working in a file that has XREFs in it, we'll get another heading in there labeled XREF, and then when you expand that out, you're going to get a list of all the XREFs contained in that particular file. The purpose of layer filters is really to help us weed through or kind of sort through the large numbers of layers that pretty commonly crop up within any given drawing. You see this house, this particular project I have here, I'm already up to 305 layers, and that's a result of having both working layers that are hosted within this file and in this case, the exact same list of layers that are being pulled through from my XREF.
And this is just a bungalow.
And this is just a tiny little, yeah, I forget how many square footage. This is one of our practice files. You might recognize it if you've taken any of the CAD classes here. And I'm working with a set of layers here that are somewhat similar to the AIA standard. And this is the thing, that if you're working with something like the AIA standard or the Army Corps of Engineers standard or the National CAD standard, a lot of those have a very, very large list of just basic layers, and then you go and add on to those. So you could start out with a drawing that has 175 or 200 plus layers, even if you're not using those all yet. And then when you go and have that same layer list in another file that you then XREF into this file, you've just doubled the layers that appear in here. So it becomes kind of tedious to sort through these layers, find the one I'm looking for in order to go change some state like on, off, or freeze thaw, or lock it, or make some kind of setting change. So we use the layer filters to quickly sort through those. I'm going to switch back to this file here because I have created two filters already. One is called annotation and one is called the group filter. Notice now we'll kind of go through the operation of these, and then we'll set one up together. The annotation filter I've created is a property filter. And I've gone in and made some settings, and the main one, and the most common use in my experience anyway for a filter, is to go through and find layers with some kind of a common name element. In this case, what I've done is create a filter that is looking for any layer that has the letters A, N, and O anywhere in the title. It can be at the beginning or the end or somewhere in the middle. And so it's gone through and sorted out all of these layers, my A prefixed for my architectural, my AG for my general notes. I also have an I and an S prefix for my interiors and my structural annotation layers. If I had an XREF in here, it would also find any of the layers that contain the same string of letters. So this is one more example, and again, if you've taken in my classes, you're probably going to hear me, you will hear me talk about this a lot, maintaining layer standards, having templates set up in order to aid with that. And this is one of the key features, or one of the reasons that we want to make sure we're doing that, because that allows me to sort and filter for those layers. If somebody had gone in here and left out the A, N, and O and just used the general name notes or something like that, it wouldn't catch it this way. I might have to do multiple properties in there, like sorting for both the ANO and both the note words and listing all those. We also have something called group filters. You see over here on the left, I have group filter 1. I didn't name it anything special. Group filters are kind of free-form filters. I can just grab and place whatever layer I want into the group filter on the fly. It doesn't have to have, they don't have to have any particular properties in common. The layers do not. I can just go to my all filter here, and I can just simply grab a particular layer I'm looking for and drag it into that filter to create that. So we'll take a look at those and some of the things we can do with that. So let's talk about setting up filters. That's what these buttons up here at the top left corner are. And the first one on the very furthest left is a new property filter. And when you go ahead and click on that, you get a dialog box. And we can first give it a name. Pretty typical workflow, dialog box, give the thing a name. And usually you're going to name this according to the property that you're trying to sort out from the layers. That's why my previous one was called annotations. Maybe I want to call this wall layers, let's see, dimensions, something like that. Annotations is probably going to actually carry that, but whatever name makes sense. And then down here in the filter definition field, we have all of the same headings that we will see out here in our layer properties manager. And you see these are all fields, and if these are states, if any of the fields are a state, you can click there and you'll get a drop-down list and you can select from the list. So like on the on, off, freeze, thaw, I can choose, am I looking for layers that are frozen or are they on or are they off? Am I looking for layers that are frozen or thawed? If any particular setting here, any of these columns, is not relevant to the filter, just leave it blank and it will ignore that. It'll find all the layers no matter their state under any of these. The one that's most important is the name column. When you click into that the first time, you're going to get a little asterisk that pops up. That's a wild card. Basically, that is going to be a stand-in for any combination of letters, and you can use several of these. So what I had done before with my annotation is I placed an asterisk at the beginning and said ANNO, and you notice down here it's giving me a filter preview at the bottom. Nothing's showing up because I don't have any letters that have something ending in ANNO. What I have to do is add in an additional asterisk there, and you'll see now it's going to tease out all the layers that contain that string of letters. And you also notice that it automatically added in another row, so you can go and filter for multiple properties. I could say sort for layers that start with ANNO or have ANNO anywhere in there. I could also sort for layers that contain the string DIM for dimensions. And according to the layer standard and layer names you use, these will have some, you would have relevant information you're looking for. Once you have created the proper filter definition here at the top, you just hit OK. That filter then will show up over here on the left-hand side. There's my dimensions. And when you select that filter on the left, you get a list of the layers, and only those layers that fit that particular filter definition. So in this case, with my annotation, I get a list. Actually, it's the same basic layer list. And then this allows me to use things like my right-click options, select all, and then I can go and make changes here. I can change the color. Maybe I want to grab all the annotation layers and freeze them at once. You can also right-click over here on the left on the filter name, and you're going to get its visibility. And this allows me, without even having to say select all, I can say visibility and then choose from a list, on, off, thawed, frozen, and affect the entire layer list in one shot. You can also lock and unlock that group of layers. Maybe annotation is something that is typically reserved for one person on the team. The project manager or somebody is the only one who should really be working on those layers. So you want to lock them as a group, and then you can unlock them this way. The group filter, which is the second button up here on the top left, this just pops open creates a new group filter, and the name is automatically highlighted so that I can go in and type a new name here. And you see when you first create it, it's going to be empty. What you have to do is come up here to the all filter, which shows everything. And then you can simply drag, you can select in any method you want. Area, I'll grab, I don't know, ceiling. These have nothing in common. None of these layers have anything. Here's one that's dashed. When I grab those layers, I can then drag and drop them over to my group filter. And you see then they're added into this list. So you can use this because sometimes it's just too tedious to go in and try and filter for properties, and oftentimes it's just not possible. You just will not be able to sort for all the individual little settings and statuses that make up a group of layers that are relevant to some particular piece of work you're trying to do. You can also grab any of your property filters you've created. Here's my dimensions. And you see we can right-click on it, and we get an option to convert to group filter. This is going to allow me to sort for properties first, or filter for properties first, then convert it to a group filter and maybe add in a couple additional layers that we're not able to, AutoCAD was not able to pull out based on properties alone.
Juliana asked a side question. Juliana, pay attention to what we're doing here. She wanted to know what the program that you use to do the red arrows are.
We use something here called ePointer. There is a free version of it out there that it just puts a little website address across the top of your screen every time you turn it on. But yeah, pretty slick. Allows me to do arrows and boxes, and I can freehand sketch and those kind of things too. The other thing I use is just there's a setting in Windows. Actually, you guys can't even see it happening, can you? Never mind. I won't talk about that one. Yeah, GoToMeeting has too much of a lag in it for my little control highlighter to show up. So once we've created some filters, one thing that makes these especially useful then is not just that I can list all the layers that meet the filter criteria. I can do the opposite. I can come down here to the lower left corner, down in the filters pane, and there's this checkmark box for invert filter, and that's going to do just that. If I select my annotation filter and say invert filter, it's displaying all the layers that do not meet the filter criteria. You'll notice that any of my A, N, and O layers are no longer displayed here. So now I can do the same. I can right click, I can select all, I can make changes there as I need. This is also helpful. Let me switch back here. In this particular file, I have XREF'd in the floor plan. It's the same floor plan. I've just XREF'd it in so that we get a little bit better, an example of what happens when we're using XREFs here in the layer filters. We get this additional heading for XREF under the layer filters. And these are automatic. These show up instantaneously when you place an XREF in. And you will get a list of all the XREFs here. You can individually select the XREFs and you'll see a list of the layers being pulled through with the XREF. You can click the XREF heading and it will actually display all the XREF dependent layers. So if you have multiple XREFs, they would all display in here. Here again, you can come down to the lower left corner and say invert filter. And what we get at then is a list of all the layers not contained in XREFs. These are the actual native layers to this file. I use it for that purpose a lot because it reduces down. I can see here at the bottom, now I'm only displaying 152 layers of 305 total layers. So that significantly reduces the layers listed here.
Let me ask you, Marta asks, before we get too far away from it here, Marta asks, can you copy and save with a different name before inverting a filter?
So that you could have one. I don't believe we can copy. Let me switch back here. I have not tried that. It does not appear that we can copy these and rename them so that I could create one similar, not based on this method. No, I don't have a start with or anything like that. So I don't believe that I can copy an existing filter in order to make maybe minor modifications or to have one show up as inverted and one not shown as inverted. The invert filter here doesn't actually tie to any of these. So if I select one and say invert, select one filter and then choose a different filter, the invert button stays checked, you see down here. So that's something just to be cautious of. Sometimes you look at the list and you think you've got everything, but you've in fact got the opposite of what you meant to display. Another nice thing about creating a layer filter and using either the XREF or one of your own filters is that you have the ability to then come up here on the ribbon on your layers panel and specify. Let me go here, choose annotation, uncheck invert, and we'll see that you have the ability then to have your filter applied in the Layer Properties Manager also apply to the drop-down, the layers drop-down on the layers panel in the ribbon. This is really nice because, again, when you have 300, 400, 500 layers in a drawing and you're trying to find one here within the stack to make it current or change a setting, it can get really tedious trying to find it.
And
here
they're
in the
all
list.
some shade of raspberry.
Apparently these are.
Just kidding.
Yeah. I'm going with pastels today. Yeah, they're all, you know, and they all have cryptic names, especially when you get into really large standards that have 250 layers to start out with. Sometimes it's hard to find the one you're looking for. So I like to have that. If that is not what's happening in yours and you'd like for this filter to also display the same, or this list to display the same filter as you see in their properties, what you have to do is come up here to the settings, the little wrench in the upper right hand corner of the layer filter or layer properties manager. And down here then we have this option, apply layer filter to layer toolbar. So that's all we have to do. Check that there on the left side, and whatever filter is applied here, whether or not it's inverted, if you invert it, you get the same list. Whatever you see in this list will display up here on the layers panel or layers toolbar if you're using AutoCAD Classic. So that's the basics of layer filters. They are changeable, they are editable. You know, so you can right click on one of these. There is a properties option when you right click on the name of the filter, and you can go in and make any kinds of changes here. I could add in additional settings to sort for, add in additional names, whatever it might be. You can change the name. All right. What I'd like to spend more time on, though, if there are any more questions, feel free to ask any more questions, though, if anything comes to mind. I'm going to move on to something called layer states. Layer states are very, very handy when you have complex drawings. They're actually pretty handy even if you have somewhat simplistic drawings. Maybe you don't deal with large numbers of layers. The layer states are not really intended to, well, I guess their big benefit is not necessarily that they help us sort through or organize large groups of layers. It's that when we have a large group or small number, we can save their settings in order to recall those settings at a later date, like the on-off, freeze, thaw, even color and line type. Those kinds of properties for layers can be changed on the fly and then restored back to a previous state at any given time. Now, the biggest, one of the key things you want to do with these to get the most, take the greatest advantage of them, is to actually build these into your template. And I talk about this all the time too in all my classes and in any kind of event like this. I talk about templates and templates and templates. I had always kind of assumed, I guess before I was doing a lot more doing tech support, that templates were just sort of a natural part of establishing an AutoCAD workflow within an office. But I'm finding that there's a lot of offices out there that haven't really taken the time to establish proper templates. So I'm tentatively thinking of adding that to one of my webinar topics for next year. You know, if anybody has particular questions on that, again, we have that webinars at CAD-1.com. Feel free to chime in on that. But anyway, in your template, you would have created your CAD manager, or you would have created some of these layer states. And we've seen these. You typically are going to see at least some hint of these because on the layers panel, we have this unsaved layer state indicator. And we can, in the template, once we've created all our layers, we can go through and say, okay, well, I commonly, and I always kind of fall back on architectural and construction references. One of the common things is that we use the floor plan to both represent a floor plan, as you see here, and a reflected ceiling plan. So I'd use this to draw my ceiling grids and my lights and my diffusers and sprinklers and things like that. And I don't want to necessarily have to maintain multiple files, so I do them all in one file together, all that drawing. But that means that I've got now two groups of layers that really don't have any reference to one another. I don't need my ceiling grid to show at the same time as my furniture. What I see sometimes people doing is coming here to the Layer Properties Manager and spending 10 minutes every time they want to show the floor plan, turning layers on and off, or freezing and thawing, coming here and switching colors and line types in order to get the layers to display properly. And then they say, oh man, now I need to work on my floor plan. So they spend another 10 minutes going through and making changes in here, setting it back to the floor plan settings. Layer states are intended to do that, to automate that process or capture that for us. We're going to see in this file, I have created, when I click here on the drop-down lists where it says unsaved layer state, I've created two layer states called FPL and RCP for floor plan and reflected ceiling plan. Again, these are just names. They could be named anything. I could have named them Bob if I wanted. And this is kind of nice. In 2013, they've created these settings previews. So when I hover on one of those layer states, I'm going to get a preview in the drawing area of the settings for that particular layer state. So now take notice of two things. Look at the doors in this particular file, that they're dashed. But when I go to the FPL, they're solid. And you'll notice things like the dimensions disappear on the reflected ceiling plans, but the door headers, the lines inside the door openings, appear again. So I can, and the furniture disappears as well. Those are the kind of settings we change, we save. So the workflow typically is that you come in here, you can use your layer filters, maybe tease out all of the layers with annotation and freeze those. Maybe all your dimensions, anything that you don't want to show, go in and freeze it or turn it off. It's your call on which one you use. There's various reasons. For those of you who work on very, very large drawings, GIS and civil kind of stuff, you want to freeze layers typically because they take up less resources when they're in that state. But anyway, you freeze, you thaw. You can additionally change any of these other properties. I can change the color, I can change the line type. Anything you see here in the Layer Properties Manager, I can make a change to that, and the layer state will capture that. That's why when I click on RCP, my doors suddenly become dashed and my headers disappear. I do not have multiple doors drawn here. I don't have a RCP door drawn with dash lines on one layer and another door object drawn on my floor plan layer. These are in fact the exact same door on the exact same layer. When you've gone through and you have set up the properties for the layers, in order to capture that, you just click on the drop-down list and you see there is this new layer state. And fortunately I can't get it to stay open while I use my pointer, so I'll just hover there. The new layer state will open a dialog box, ask me to give it a name as always. And I'm just going to give it a very generic name. You can give it a description as well. It will show up in the manager. If other people are working on your file and you want them to have some understanding of what this particular layer state was intended to do, go ahead and tab a description there. And when you do that, you see it will have saved that setting. And now as I go in and make any kinds of layer changes, maybe I've come in here and said thaw everything and turn all my layers on. Now we'll see, that's funny. It really should say up here, it should have switched to unsaved layer state. But then I can actually choose that from the list. Oh, new layer state was a bad name to choose because now it's actually got, that's one of the options to select.
A few of them.
We'll see that we can change that name. But then I could actually restore one of these other states. Why is it not doing that? There we go. My floor plan and my RCP. And there's my new layer state. There we go. So that lets me quickly switch back and forth. So again, another reason to use a common layer standard. It doesn't have to be a national standard recognized by any other industry or anything like that. It can just be your own office standard. But make sure everybody's adhering to that, because in the template you can then create these layer states and say these group of layers, even if I don't have anything drawn in my file yet, which you won't in your template, go through and tease out and set up the RCP typical layer states, save it and name it RCP, then create one for your floor plan, any of your different types of drawings that will be generated from this file, dimensioning plans, furniture plans, I don't know, demolition versus existing, or versus new, proposed versus existing, whatever it might be, any of those kind of things that you use a lot of layer management for, save it into a layer state. The other great thing is that you can save that. Once you've saved and created one of these layer states, if somebody comes into your drawing, makes lots of changes, sometimes your boss decides that today they're going to start working on AutoCAD, go in and start clicking lots of stuff and generally kind of mess things up, mess the drawing up a little bit. All you have to do is come in here and maybe they start using this freeze and say, I don't want to see the text, I don't want to see that, I don't want to see the headers. Nope, that's the current layer. Pretty soon they're looking at it and they're like, man, I can't see anything. Where did everything go? Well, I could, the old-fashioned way again, go to my Layer Properties Manager and one by one go through and find the frozen layers. Or more quickly, just click the drop-down list and choose my floor plan. And just like that, it's restored back.
We have a couple questions here, Michael,
Okay.
when you're ready.
Yep.
First off, John, I see your little hand button is raised there, and I don't know if you're needing to ask a question or what. If you could, we can't hear you in this particular case, so if you can type that in, if you do have a question, into the question box, we'll get it answered for you. Cesario asks, what recommendation and how do you set up layers so an XREF can be turned on or off per layouts? And then he comments in the next line, per through Viewport.
Through the Viewport. Okay, let me go to a... So this is a little bit of a... We'll take a little detour here for a second to talk about this. There's a couple common ways. I've seen a couple different ways, and I refrain from really recommending... well, I should say, I refrain from saying this is the way to do it. Because everybody knows, anybody who's used AutoCAD for more than a few days starts realizing how many different ways there are to achieve any result. A common solution is to place XREFs onto their own layer, or maybe all XREFs onto an XREF layer. Then through the viewport, you can do a viewport freeze to that layer, and then the whole XREF disappears. If you're talking about managing the layers within the XREF through a viewport, those are overridden or managed just the same way that you would any other layer. You go through the viewport and turn on and off or freeze and thaw layers that are XREF dependent. So it is possible to place an XREF on whatever layer you want. In this case, here's a perfect example of being bad draftsmanship. I placed this XREF on layer 8 Anodims. A common solution might be to actually place it on the layer 0. Here we go, just a second, select it, place the whole thing on layer 0, or place it onto a new layer called XREFs, or XREF main level XREF, whatever you want to call it, so that you can then go through a viewport, and here in the Layer Properties Manager, or you can use your freeze, depending on your settings, you can just freeze it, and it will do a VP freeze on the layer that contains the XREF. Again, there's several settings that will play into the behavior there, but yeah, so that's one option. Put it on its own layer. All right, so layer state here. So we switch back and forth. Let me switch back to this file. We can switch. We can have as many of these as we want. I'll also show you in this file, this is the one that has my floor plan in there as an XREF. You see, we also have layer states, but they will come through when you XREF a file. The layer states contained in that XREF will display here by default. So there I have renamed my floor plan FPL. So that's why I have FPL underscore FPL and FPL underscore RCP. These are both coming through from the XREF. So that's really nice. So we don't have to recreate the layer state if we're using that same file in other files. We can replace them or restore them right from here. Additionally, we have something here called the Layer State Manager. And this is actually, it's listed under the drop-down as Manage Layer States. This will be easier if I switch. I'm going to have to switch back here to, this is the one where I've got actual native line work. I'm going to choose there the Manage Layer States option. And of course, that opens up another dialog box. And I'm going to see my current layer states listed here on the left side in this pane, and various options or various settings there, properties of those. Of course, we can select any of these and come over here to the right side, and I can create another new one. This is going to capture whatever I see in the background. I can save the current one as, and that'll let me overwrite one of the current states that are already created. I can select one of these states and say Edit. You can rename it there, and you can delete it. Maybe you created one for a very temporary use and it's confusing you to have it there. I can go ahead and delete it. Perfect example. Let's delete new layer state. Yes, I do want to delete it, and there we go. Now it's no longer in the list. You can also select these and hit Restore down here at the bottom, which is the same as selecting it from the Layers panel. And there's several things that we can do. If you select one of these and click Edit on the right, this will let me go down the list and change the state of any of these layers. Maybe I had saved this particular layer state, and for some reason I actually wanted them to, I had E-electrical or E-elec was frozen. I decided I actually wanted that one to be on in this state. This allows me to go in and make those kind of changes. You can also remove or add in additional layers. So what happens is that when you create a layer state, it's taking a, I'll use the term snapshot, that's what they used to be called. It's kind of taking a snapshot of the current layers that exist at that moment in the file. If you were to add in more layers at a later point, those won't get listed in here because it didn't see those at the time. You can add those in and then change their status. You can also remove layers so that they're not even considered. What will happen when you restore this layer state, if the layer is not listed here, it will just leave it in its current state. If a layer is thawed, it's visible in my drawing, and I restore a state that it doesn't contain that particular layer, it'll just leave it as is. It'll leave it thawed and visible. Or, well, I guess I should take that back. It can have that effect, or you can check this box down here and say, turn off layers not found in a layer state. That'll turn them off if they're not in the list. So any new layers that got added to the drawing after that particular layer state was created, or maybe were removed from that layer state, with this checked, it will just turn them off so they don't show up in the file. This can be nice if you start out with a template that has all the layers you should ever use in your files, and somebody goes and creates additional layers in that, maybe non-standard layers. Using this feature here, we'll just turn them off. It won't show them. That might mean that some important information doesn't get printed. On the other hand, that does indicate to you that that piece of information was probably put on an inappropriate non-standard layer. Over here on the right-hand side, farthest right, we have layer properties to restore. And you'll notice that in this case, everything is checked. That is the default. When you restore one of the layer states you see on the left, which layers, layer properties, do you want to be affected by that state? You can choose this. Typically, we'd want all those properties to be applied if it's, especially like freeze, thaw, on and off, but maybe you don't want it actually line type to be changed. Maybe you always want the line types to remain as they were originally set. You can uncheck line type and they'll always maintain that. Most of the time, in my experience anyway, we're going to want the whole layer properties, all the layer properties checked so that they are all restored. You also have the ability here to import and export. So this is a great feature if you find that maybe you'd like to create some layer states in, let's say, a template drawing that you're going forward with, and you'd like to then import that or use that information in other files that already exist. Maybe you're receiving a drawing from a consultant that doesn't use layer states and you want to grab one of yours to apply it to the consultant's drawing. We can come in here and say import, or if you're in the file that contains that information, click export, and it's going to save this as its own little file here. You see it gets its own little LAS extension. Of course, you just pick wherever in the drawing, wherever in your network or on your file structure you'd like to locate that. Maybe locate it into your, save it into your company library or something like that, wherever your templates reside perhaps. And then you could later on go to another file and click on import and just simply go and browse for that LAS. So that makes them even more powerful because we don't necessarily have to create them in every file that doesn't yet contain the state. You can do it once in one file and then with a few clicks pull it through into other files and then restore it using once it displays here in the list. Let me close this here. Let's see, I'm going to check my notes to see if there's anything else we want to talk about. And we will close that. A couple other things here. When we might talk about this just a little bit. There was a question about working through the viewports. And set this to a proper layer, proper scale. We can come in here into our, when we're working through a viewport, that is, let me switch there. I've activated a viewport. I'm actually working inside my viewport in the background here. And when I launch the Layer Properties Manager, most people, or many people are aware of this, that you can actually make changes to layers through a viewport and only have those changes take effect within that viewport. So when you are in a viewport and you decide to make any of these changes, like maybe I'm going to come in here and let's just grab this annotation and just do a select all. So I'm using my annotation filter, select all, and we're going to switch all of those in the viewport to some horrendous color that's easy to spot. And let's see, what layer state do I have? I'm going to apply my RCP. I don't know, my floor plan.
I'm going to tell you, Michael, that the National Color Standards Board said that tangerine orange is the color for 2013. So calling it horrendous is not a good start.
Is that that's the color for this year? Well, I know there's several auto manufacturers that are going with it.
Yeah.
We'll see that when you apply, I guess a couple things that are happening here. I went into my viewport and I applied my FPL layer state, and the setting in the Layer States Manager was that these should be applied as a layer override in a viewport, as a VP override. And that's why when I go to my Layer Properties Manager now, these particular layers, all of my annotation layers, are highlighted in blue, because what's happening is it's saying that they've been overridden. They actually match across here. You can also, when you're working in a viewport, make any kinds of changes you might want to a, pin that open, to a given layer or group of layers, and then save another layer state here. So I say new layer state, and we'll call this one VP overrides. Overrides, there we go. And say OK. And it will actually save those settings that are part of the layer states, or part of the VP override there. Back in here, I can still apply my various other layer states, my FPL, back in my model space, but when I switch back to the viewport here, I've still got those settings held, and if somebody comes in and makes a change to the layer properties and says, now let's just grab a handful of these, come on, click the right stuff here, there we go, make some cyan. When I come back in here, I'll see some of my stuff here, I'm not sure exactly which parts changed. Let's change Anno dim so we know that one will display. There we go. I can come back and restore that VP overrides layer state and have it apply that to that particular viewport. So again, if you use one particular DWG, just one DWG file, in order to represent multiple kinds of information, you can have that done not just in model space, but you can have it take effect on your viewports. So quite a few different applications there. So I don't know if there's no questions.
No questions so far.
That's great. I guess.
Well, you know,
maybe I'm either explaining things really well or not explaining things at all. Maybe I've gone completely over.
Sometimes you just don't know what to ask.
Yeah. So let's see. What else do we want to talk about then? I was really expecting a lot of questions on this one, Stan, so I'm kind of running.
Well, if it runs low, it runs low. And
yeah.
it's a good webinar and very. Oh, here's one.
We'll call it succinct.
Cesario brought us another one. How does the changing of colors through VP, which I stand for viewports, I assume, affect styles and setting in Civil 3D?
You know, honestly, that I can't tell you. So Civil 3D is. I think I've watched about 4 hours of Brian Haley's class one day, and it all went straight over my head. Above and the vanilla AutoCAD stuff, I can't really honestly say how they're affected when you're dealing with styles. So
Cesario, would you do us the favor? Would you email the question to webinars@cad1.com, and we'll forward it over to Mr. Haley and get you an answer to that question anyway. Or you can tune into Civil Chat on September 12th and ask him then as well. It's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some implications when you get into some of what we refer to here as the vertical Civil 3D AutoCAD architecture, AutoCAD MEP. There are a few things that are affected, because you have the objects that contain, like intelligent walls and ductwork and piping and those kind of things, contain layers inside of the object itself. They contain multiple layers. So there's a few more implications when we get into applying layer states in there, and I guess that hadn't really occurred to me that maybe
what gets affected, what doesn't, when you set up styles, etc.
Yeah, to give a few examples of that.
And what I will say, Michael, is just in case anyone's interested, and since I'm on the sales side of the house, if nothing else, we often say, well, you have somebody set up these templates for you, and a lot of people really don't know how to do it out there. So, your idea of having a webinar and setting up some templates might be good. But further, if you'd like some help for your firm, to have Michael or Mr. Haley or one of the other guys that's appropriate to your industry come out and help you set up some of this, we do it all the time, and we'd be happy to come out and spend a half day or a couple days or whatever with you and help you get a lot of these things in place. The few hours time can be offset by the great efficiencies that you can gain many times. So let us know if that's appropriate for you.
Yeah, things like layer states, once they're established, and if you take the time to kind of work through your first one, get some idea of how they function, then it gets a lot easier to create additional layer states and other similar kind of time saver tools. And then, it might take a few days of actual CAD manager time to get these into place and put them into the template. But this especially will be a big time saver if you switch among a lot of different kinds of files on a pretty regular basis, or a lot of different views of your drawings on a regular basis.
The other thing I will bring up for you is that we have started recording our webinars, and we've we're getting better at it. Let's put it that way. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but we're getting better at it and more consistent. This webinar is being recorded today. We will have it posted on our YouTube CAD-1 YouTube page, Facebook CAD-1 YouTube.
YouTube channel, I think we have.
Yeah, YouTube channel. That's what I was searching for there. And we do have those posted on the CAD-1/events website, and then you go to events and then look at the archives, and we'll provide a link to get to that page. And it usually takes us a couple days to get them posted up, sometimes as much as a week, depending on how busy the person that post-processes these and gets them posted is. So you can look for those in the future if you like. Anything else right now, Michael?
I don't think so. If there aren't any questions coming up, then I'd hopefully, feel free again. Pull it up one more time.
We've got
our
we've got our events. It's lagging a little bit there. We've got Civil Chat on September 12th from 10 to 11 in the morning. Civil Chat with Brian Haley. And then we've got Revit Radio for all you Reviteers out there on September 12th from 1:30 to 2:30. And we've got AutoCAD Answers with Michael Calkins again on September 20th from 1:30 to 2:30. Look forward to that. We're letting you off about 9 minutes early, so go have some fun.
Remember, write to webinars@cad-1.com if you have any other topics that you'd like to see.
Yes, it is more than the red-green show. That's right. All right, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.